The ongoing crisis in Venezuela is now officially the worst in that country's history. Over 3 million people have fled Venezuela's poverty, corruption, crime, and despair. And now, a disputed presidency between Nicolas Maduro and self-declared interim president Juan Guaido. Hundreds of tons of aid sent by the United States, Brazil, and Colombia in support of Guaido caused violent clashes at border crossings as Venezuelan guard troops loyal to Maduro burned the aid in front of starving Venezuelans. Insisting there's no crisis, Nicolas Maduro has cut relations completely with Colombia and accuses the United States of planning an invasion. Meanwhile, desperate Venezuelans do whatever they must to survive, including smuggling scrap metal across the porous border and even selling their bodies in order to eat. The United States is slapping more sanctions on Maduro's government and ramping up the pressure for him to step down. But that's unlikely to happen as long as Cuba, Russia, and Iran continue to support Maduro.
Chuck is here. He just gave me this. This is 20,000, 5,000. It's 50,000 bolivars, which is worth, Chuck?
Absolutely zero now. This is the Bolivar Fuerte after they knocked off 4 zeros.
Yeah.
And now since then, they've knocked off another 6 zeros. So the current Bolivar Soberano, they call it, is their current currency, but it's also worthless. The people
somebody's got all this stuff in the bank. Their savings are totally
absolutely wiped out. They're absolutely worthless. As a matter of fact, they are dismantling anything of value in Venezuela, anything metal, anything copper, and they're carrying it across the border into Colombia to sell because their currency is worthless. You could bring a truckload across and it wouldn't buy you a roll of toilet paper.
You've been around the world. Have you ever seen a financial disaster of this magnitude?
Well, I mean, obviously we've had disasters like this going all the way back to the Weimar Republic or Argentina in the 1980s, but I've never seen desperation like I've seen with these people. And they're so angry. They're so angry because they see what Maduro has done to their country. They see what that Chavez socialism has done to their country. And they are, if you yell out the name of Maduro in a crowd of Venezuelans, they will respond en masse with a profanity. Just every time, because they just can't help it. They're so mad.
When you talk to individuals one-on-one, what did they tell you? Why don't they get rid of that clown?
They said, the biggest mistake we made was allowing ourselves to be disarmed back in 2012 because we don't have the ability to get him out of there. Not only that, Maduro, his own generals are going to have a hard time getting him out of there because he has surrounded himself with Russian mercenaries and Cuban troops now because he doesn't trust his own army to protect him.
Well, how much force would it take to unseat him?
I think that his regime will collapse eventually under the weight of its own evil. Unfortunately, because Russia and Cuba and Iran have vested interest in keeping him there, it's going to be a bloody battle. No two ways about it. I think it's going to be bloody.
Well, is there any possibility of setting up something at the border to scare those people into surrendering? I mean, if you just have, we've got helicopter gunships that's got some pretty powerful weapons.
No, they're not going to do that.
They're not going to do that?
They're not going to do that. As a matter of fact, I think that probably the tack that they're taking right now is the best one that they could possibly take, and that is putting very strong sanctions on not just Maduro, but on the people around Maduro. And then we've got hundreds of tons of aid, and we're saying, we have all this aid to give you people. And if you'll just allow us to bring it in, we'll give it away and we'll help people inside Venezuela.
But he set it on fire.
He did, and do you think he won the PR battle over that?
It was hell. It was unbelievable.
No, that's terrible for him. It's not going to help his image with his own people. And I think really, it's sad to say, but if you ask yourself, why should Americans send our sons and daughters down there I think that's what a lot of Americans are saying. Why should we send our sons and daughters down there to unseat this guy if the Venezuelan people will not do what it takes to unseat this guy? And they're trying. They're trying.
Well, they can't go up again. You said disarm. The Second Amendment is a pretty powerful thing, isn't it?
It certainly is. It certainly is. And I can't, tell you how many people that I have talked to Venezuelans. I mean, what do I know about the Venezuelan Constitution? Not that much. But you talk to people in Venezuela or in Europe or anywhere around the world, they know what the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is about. And even if they don't agree with it, they know about it because it's so unique. And it gives Americans the ability to stand up to a corrupt government.
Whew. Well, it must have broken your heart, though, to talk to those people. I mean, it's heart-rending to see this poverty, this death.
It really, really is. I mean, when you see these people carrying their babies across, and their babies are so limp that they just can't even hold their heads up because they're so hungry, and people telling you about their loved ones dying of hunger. I talked to 3 young girls that are my daughter's age. My youngest daughter is 16. I talked to 3 teenage girls that were on the street selling their bodies for the last year. And I said, where do your parents think you are right now? And they said, well, we told them that we work at a piñata shop, but they've been selling their bodies for $6 a service to try to make enough money to eat. And they say it's absolutely horrible doing this, but it's better than starving to death. And that's their option.
We had a radio station in Bogota, in Colombia, Nuevo Continente, and I'm very familiar with Colombia. How are they handling this flood of Venezuelan refugees?
Colombia has done a very good job. They've really put out a lot of effort to help the Venezuelan people. And like in Cucuta, it was a town of 300,000 people. They say there might be 500,000 Venezuelans in that town right now. So it's really overcrowded. Many of these Venezuelans are walking 500 kilometers from the border of Venezuela to Bogota because there's help and aid and stuff there. But as far as, they are overwhelmed, and Colombia needs help from the world community to deal with this.
But you think that, as far as you can tell right now, there's no military force? I mean, Maduro is not going to just walk away because he will be executed himself.
If he stays in Venezuela, they say that he's already shipped over $1 billion worth of gold from Venezuela's treasury into Russia, with the idea that probably if he has to run, he'll flee to Russia and live there in luxury.
Well, the Brits put the screws. They were trying to take some of the gold, and they forbade them to do that. So
Right. So the bottom line is, if he has to go, he's not going to go without a fight. And that fight's going to be bloody, and it's going to go on much longer than it needs to, because he obviously does not care about his people. I mean, he denies that there's even a problem. Well, how can you have 2,000,000% inflation and say there's no problem? I mean, that's just doesn't make any sense at all.
He was initially, what was he, a cab driver or something?
I think so, yeah. He said he came from some sort of middle-class upbringing.
But he has no background.
He does have a military background.
Military.
He was a fairly well-known military colonel, I think. And that is kind of how he got to where he is.
A long time ago, I was interviewing one of our people, and we were talking about Hugo Chavez, who made some comment about America is going to, assassinate me, and I sort of made an off-the-cuff comment. Well, maybe we ought to go ahead and do it. And people around the world were just simply horrified. Isn't that terrible? You're talking about assassinating a leader. If we had taken him out, this tragedy would not have developed.
Well, hopefully that they would have had somebody better that stepped in there. Juan Guaido, their new the interim president, has a good head on his shoulders. He has met with U.S. leaders and other leaders from across Latin America, and he just returned to Venezuela, even though he was prohibited from leaving, and they said they'd arrest him when he came back. He returned to a hero's welcome yesterday, so I think the people there are behind him.
Who's protecting him from getting assassinated?
Well, large crowds of people at this point, very, very large crowds of people. Now, the scary thing is, Maduro is following the template that Noriega started back in Panama as a dictator, and he's emptying the prisons. He's arming the prisoners. I have video of prisoners pledging loyalty to Maduro. He's arming them, and he's giving them license to go and rape and pillage and destroy. And they have been exacting vengeance on the people who are supporting Juan Guaido, according to my sources inside Venezuela.
Chuck, my heart just breaks when I think of something like this. Those suffering people. I remember years ago when we were studying things, Caracas was held out as the model of a beautiful city. Caracas was the really big, broad highways going in, all kinds of money, lovely buildings, wonderful business. And
right, and now it's a war zone. I mean, it's actually more dangerous in Caracas than it was in Syria, where I was a couple weeks before that. And they say that it's the most dangerous place in the world outside of an active war zone.
Well, Chuck, thank you for this report. And ladies and gentlemen, if nothing else, you can pray. On this one, I'd like to see some action, but anyhow, I guess wiser heads are saying, cool it, but I don't want to cool it. I want to get that thug out of there and help those